floor director and one of two key people that keep the station up and running. And you're not supposed to be taping me. I'm just and he's going to work that camera, and Vernell's going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sounds good.
Ding. Okay. The first question is, you were mentioning before you got off stage about equipment and the Army, the new equipment that's coming about. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Well, there are 18 new systems that's coming into existence under a term called Future Combat Systems. What they're attempting to do is use more technology, use more robotics, make the force about half as heavy as it currently is so it can be deployable on C-17 aircraft. That means we can get to the operational area very, very rapidly with air power rather than having to go on surface ships. So this is all new technology. It is really state-of-the-art. Robotics, they've have non-line of sight vehicles. They have vehicle robotics that will go inside a building and look for things that you wouldn't have to expose a soldier to possible injury by sending somebody that climbs stairs, look over walls. I was just reading about a new technique that someone has developed where when they're fighting in the caves in Afghanistan, they can throw an item inside the cave the size of a softball. It takes reading if it's heat sensor, and so if there's anyone in there, it can send a readout to the soldiers outside, and they don't have to go in and expose themselves.
Wow. Is there a budget set out for that? Or?
There is a budget set up, not as much. I think about $4 billion at the present time. It should be fielded between now and 2015.
Do you have any insight on that?
Let me use a household example.
Okay.
All right. You have a car. It's kind of broken down, and you have to go somewhere next week. You really want a car that will get you somewhere next year, but right now you've got to go somewhere next week. Do you invest the money to repair the car to get you to next week, or do you save the money in order to get you somewhere next year? Extend that example 1,000,000 times. And you're looking at the current Army's equipment, which needs to be repaired, repositioned, and reused. Yet we're trying to build that Army that General Jones talked about, which is new equipment with the high technologies that laboratories will allow us to at least think about and test. We know it works. It's a dollars problem. The nation is being asked to pay for two things: the Army we have and the Army we want. We're being asked to pay for both of them at the same time. It's easy to say. Tough to do.
Plus pay for the global war on terrorism.
Yeah, sure. Plus pay for the war.
And it all costs money. Yeah, bottom line on that.
Yeah, that's your main thing, pay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was listening. And what do you feel that there's a certain amount that you should be, like, the Army, as far as like the family should be paid on when they're actually entering? Or
yes, I can answer that real quick, and I speak on it often, is that I think that every soldier that wear that uniform should be making 6 figures a year for what we as a nation ask them to do for us. And by the way, they protect our way of life there. And I like to quote Winston Churchill: "Never has so much been owed to so few by so many." And that's well said about today's Army and our fighting men and women there. We are actually a lot of them, and we talked briefly about the up-tempo, the number of deployments that we're going through right now, and the pain. And General Lynch had a great article in the Fort Hood Herald this morning talking about the 15-month deployment and how traumatic that is on families there. And yeah,
it is.
Yes, we can do a little bit better with pay, we're not trying to create a mercenary army, but again, we owe our soldiers and their families a lot, because again, they do a lot for us.
Yes,
they protect that way of life, and I can't say enough about that. So.
Yes, you did mention the deployment, and I have a question about that. Do you think that, I don't know if there is a requirement, but when the families of military that have been deployed and they come back, is it a requirement for them to actually go to counseling, the whole family? Do you think that, it should be a requirement where the entire family should go?
There's a program in place where the soldiers who have been deployed go through a pre-integration 3 or 4 days. It's run by chaplains, I believe, and
reunion training.
Training, so that how do I integrate back into the family life. It's not uncommon at all for the spouses remain behind to have all decision-making authority. All of a sudden, the stranger returns back in after 15 and starts issuing orders and instructions don't necessarily coincide with what the other spouse's views were on it. So I think it is desperately needed, and I do talk to a number of spouses, and they often indicate to me that the person that I send over is not about the person that returned. They have seen so much, injuries, and have seen death and lost friends that it has changed their mind about a lot of things. So I do think that kind of programs are needed. They are also stressing marriage counseling when they get back. Our divorce rate has gone up. Child abuse is up, and so anything that you can do to reduce those statistics certainly ought to be done.
Okay. There's a lot of people that have a negative outlook on the Army at this time. What are some of the upsides of joining the Army right now? Outside of, getting the college education, is there any additional bonuses, signing bonuses, or anything that, would encourage someone?
Well, I'm going to turn to the dollar merchant in a moment, but let me respond. You cannot understate the value of pride. I joined the Army because I wanted to serve. Today's young soldiers join the Army because they want to serve. I know that sounds corny. They look at the flag and they actually love it. They look at their brothers and their sisters left and right in the formation, and they actually love them. Do not understate that. That is just an enormously... They don't understand it when they join. But the moment they get in, believe me, they understand that. And so they're there because they want to, they stay because they want to, and when they get tired of that formation, they can move on to something else. I'll turn it over to the paymaster over here on another question.
Oh, and by the way, did you know that they could get a college degree while on active duty and have most of that paid for while on active duty? There is all sorts of online education programs right now for being while you're on active duty. There is absolutely no reason why a soldier who joins the Army 4 or 5 years shouldn't have a college degree upon ETS and from the military there. One other thing, what other organization that you can join and retire at 20 years? In the civilian life.
And back to your basic questions, there are a number of the military occupational specialties that have signing bonuses that go along, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. So there are some tremendous signing bonuses on specific the technical fields, and so the hard to fill military occupational specialists do have additional resources to try to entice people into those jobs.
Okay, well, that's all I had. Christian?
Everybody look at me.